Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Medz Mamas. I'm your host, Anoush Bargamian. Today we're diving into a heartfelt tribute from granddaughter Violetta Sagatela to her paternal grandma, Amalia. Violetta lovingly calls her grandma Babo. In Armenian culture, grandmothers are referred to as Babo, Tatig, and Medz Mama. Amalia's story begins in 1924 in Khtsaberd, Azerbaijan. She grew up surrounded by the struggles of Armenians facing attacks from Azeris. In Amalia's story, she made her way to Baku, got married, raised a couple of kids, and worked as a seamstress for a living. She found joy in the simple things like trips to the theater and hanging out with her friends. But most of all, she held her family close to her heart. Before long, life took a harsh turn when granddaughter Violetta was 12. During the pogroms by the Azeris against Armenians in Baku, Amalia's family faced serious danger. They had to flee as refugees seeking safety in Armenia. Violetta and her grandma got separated not once, but twice during those chaotic times. Talk about stressful. Amalia's journey didn't stop in Armenia. She eventually followed her family to the USA, seeking refuge in Vermont. Now, Vermont wasn't exactly a hub for Armenians like some of the parts of New England, especially back in the 1990s. But Vermont was the state opening its arms to this family unit. Like many refugees, Amalia needed a solid Armenian community to lean on, to feel connected with her new home. Sadly, she missed out on this vital connection. The cherished memories of Babo remain a powerful bond for Violetta, reflecting the enduring love and respect she holds for her. Meanwhile, in the vibrant community of Vermont, a newfound connection to Armenian heritage is emerging through university groups and local chapter affiliations with organizations like the Armenian Relief Society. I'd like to share this with my listeners, as many of you know. As in the case of Amalia's family, Babo, we see the exact same history repeating today. The government of Azerbaijan ethnically cleansed the Republic of Artsakh of indigenous Armenians. On September 24, 2023, after a 9-month blockade by Azerbaijan, the blockade was lifted. For 9 months, the only road linking Artsakh to Armenia and the rest of the world was blocked and left the people without food, medicine, and fuel. As a result, 120,000 Artsakh refugees were forced to flee to Armenia. Welcome, Violetta.
Thank you, Anoush. Thank you for having me. What a great opportunity to tell a story about her and her extended family and her own mother. So I was born in 1976, and she was probably one of the first people I met in my life. She lived literally a wall over. We had our apartment shared a wall, so I'm sure she was one of the first people I met after I was born. For the first 12 years of my life in Baku, she was a constant presence. She, as well as my great grandmother, her mother, they lived the next apartment over. So with my parents working full time, we often had her come over and stay with us, or we would go over to her apartment. I have amazing memories of her, and I have memories of plants, many plants she had kept, as well as cats. There was no cat in the neighborhood she wasn't a friend of, so I just associate her with cats and plants, and I am a big fan of both. now, and I think it mostly has to do with her love for these two things. She was a colorful personality. I think a bit ahead of her time. She did not take my grandfather's last name when she was married. After they separated, she had an active social life, and she worked as a seamstress and loved theater, loved socializing with her peers, with extended family, and she was one of those few people that were very unique, but not always accepted societally because she was so ahead of her years and did what she wanted to do. And I think back in those days, there were expectations of grandparents, and she defied them all, which I can reflect upon now and think, wow, Amalia was always there. And this is funny, but she loved cats. This woman loved cats. And unlike in the States, there were a huge homeless cat population, or feral cat population. And she fed them all, and they all went through through her apartment. And she would pick up the cat and she'd start singing to the cat. She'd make up these silly songs, which was, it's looking back, it was not many grandparents. Many people didn't like cats. These were feral homeless cats that were just a nuisance to everyone, but she just loved them, and she would sing to them, and she would sort of hold them as, to like pose them as they were dancing. And, she, it's that free spirit. Again, it wasn't common. It was so unusual, and some neighbors sort of frowned upon it. But she was her own person and didn't. I don't think she cared very much others' opinion, which is, to me as a child living in a society where everybody had a role and you should stay in your lane. She didn't stick to that script and just lived as she wanted. One of my earliest, very, very early memory is traveling to her home village. The name is Gurjivan. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And sort of just being in the countryside and being really warm. It was the middle of summer, and kind of sleeping under the cot. And I remember they couldn't find me, and there was this panic, but I was under the cot, on the bare floor because it was cooler. Things like that, memories like that. Very nothing really striking, nothing really like a big event. Unfortunately, we were separated when I was 12 years old. We left Baku when pogroms happened, and the Azeri population were executing Armenians, and we were forced to flee. My grandmother stayed. She felt safer being there. So we were separated for maybe a couple of years while we lived in Yerevan in Armenia. She still lived in Baku. She eventually moved to be with my aunt in southern Russia. My aunt, her daughter, had moved away as well. And, later she moved in with us in Armenia, so it was back to normal. I remember when we moved to the States, she kept chickens. She decided to keep chickens inside the apartment. Again, just to speak of her uniqueness. She had chickens everywhere. But that's what she wanted. She didn't care that they're not really an indoor animal. We had moved to the States in 1992. She followed in 1996 and had lived here until her passing at 79 years old. often, and I don't typically dream about my family members who had passed on, but she's always appearing in my dreams, and I forget that she's not living.
Oh.
Yeah, but she was a force of nature. And I'm just so fortunate. I got to be close to her, and she lived across my. I worked in a deli, and she lived right across there in the housing. So I would visit with her frequently. I spent many days there, and again, she had a cat and many plants in a tiny apartment. But she made a lot of effort to learn the English language, but unfortunately, she couldn't master it because of her age, and couldn't socialize as much as she did back at her home. And yeah, it's she definitely left a mark on me that's lifelong. And one person I think of frequently still, and both my sister and I have we hoard house plants. My partner refers to me as a plant hoarder because I think of my grandmother seeing plants, being surrounded by plants, and she had tiers. She had like levels and levels of plants. It wasn't just flat ground. She just had them. Several layers, which was fascinating to me as a child. And she would always tell me, please don't touch the leaves, because, you're going to hurt the plant. Those new leaves that come up, they were very soft, and she didn't like me touching them. And I, naturally obliged. And just very ordinary memories that become extraordinary over time when I reflect back on the times we spent together. Just a constant presence. And I just want to, something that also stood out. When I was a small child in kindergarten, I remember being bullied by these much bigger girls, and I would complain to my parents, who sort of brushed it off. And I told her one day, and she just came in and ready to take on those kids, like they were. And it was really, it felt good because somebody stood out. Stood up for me. And it was a big deal. She was that type of person, made sure you were okay. You didn't feel alone.
Sounds like she was your fierce protector, Violetta, and it's such a unique experience.
Yeah.
And to have lived with your grandmother so closely in proximity, and with your parents working, having that close bond, she looked out for you. And those experiences, those moments, they just are extremely special, and they last a lifetime, and they affect you. So it's cool that you have your own plants now, and your cats.
Oh,
and
yes.
It's like she has definitely made an impact on you, and also your spirit. You seem to be fierce in your outlook on life as well, and you stand your ground for the things that you care about. Tell us about her Armenianism, how she passed down a sense of like identity as well.
She wasn't a fierce patriot. I know a lot of Armenians sort of very, they're very, they mingled with other Armenians. They sort of had friends who were Armenians. She didn't really, she had friends all across the board. She got along with other nationalities, and she didn't really see a nationality. She saw a person, which was really unique as well, because I think it's foreign to us now, but when I was growing up, everybody had their identity, or their nationality spelled out in the passport. So, for example, and people tended to just stick with their own kind. Armenians married other Armenians, Azeris married other Azeris, and Russians, and so forth. So they weren't like in the States who have half Irish, half Italian, half Scottish, half Welsh. They were just like, you're Armenian on both sides. And she was very, she liked everybody. She got along with everybody. I remember something interesting she said to me was, she said, there wasn't a war in your father's time, but there was a war when I was a child. And there was a war now when you're for you. But she said, it skipped a generation, because I think she remembers back, even being a small child in the 1920s, she remembered the aggression toward the Armenian population in Azerbaijan. Also, interestingly, her mother, Hanum, who was this old soul boy, she was another interesting human being. She lived with my grandmother, and I would visit with her, and her face was just, you couldn't see a face. It was just wrinkles. She was so wrinkled, and there's a deep, deep grooves, And I remember she had a split earlobe, and the story was she was chased by a Turk as a young woman or as a child, I don't remember. And she was able to escape him, but he had pulled on her earring so hard, it ripped her earlobe. And, but we had that, she had that memory forever. And, it told a story. And also she had suffered, this is my great grandmother, Hanum, I grew up with her as well. She died when I was a child, but she was 96 years old. So I've had her in my life. She suffered an injury to her leg, and there weren't any physicians to fix it. So it didn't heal. It healed, but it didn't heal correctly. So she had a lifelong limp. And because of that, she didn't have many suitors. She didn't have many men back then. And this older man sort of took pity on her, and he married her, and they conceived my grandmother Amalia. But the funny thing is, he was so old. He died shortly after conceiving my grandmother Amalia, and my great grandmother Hanum raised my grandmother, and she was the only child. And that was also very different because back in the day, they had many, many children. Rarely anyone had a single child. And it was, my grandmother was a bit spoiled. Maybe there's a little bit of that, I'm going to live my life as I see it, suitable, because she was, perhaps a little bit spoiled by my great grandmother, being the only child. And they've lived together until my great grandmother passed away. They've lived together, and I had both of them sort of to go spend time with next door, and they were just memorable, unforgettable characters, almost, very unusual. Both of them were very unique, unlike other grandparents. And interestingly, my grandmother didn't get along with many people because of her because her lack of adherence to the norm. But she and I always we had a fabulous, loving relationship. And I think I always hear I was her favorite, which makes me feel extra special. But it was, I'm very fortunate. I was very fortunate. I had both of my grandmother and great grandmother next to me most of my formative years.
Do you remember any stories she would read to you?
She was an avid fan of Sayat Nova. She would talk about Sayat a lot. She didn't really sing much except to her cats, little jingles. But she loved literature. Like I said, she loved theater.
Did she have a favorite, I don't know, a saying sometimes?
Yes. She had many of them. She would say, she would sometimes say to us, your parents are not really living, they're just existing. That was a famous, and she said, she'd say, be careful when you're making right turns. She would say that my favorite was she would make faces. She would blink with both eyes and give you that sort of an assurance, like it's okay. And she would just close both of her eyes and squint. And I knew she was happy, or she was trying to be encouraging. It wasn't not so much the songs or the stories. It was just her fearlessness, her sort of ability to believe us, the kids. The most important part is she didn't brush me off. She didn't just ignore me. She was maybe somewhat childlike herself, so she was able to connect. She was able to hear me. I feel like she never really acclimated to the life in States. And, I think she suffered just from lack of that sort of connection with others. She didn't live life as she wanted anymore because she was reliant upon others.
Vermont was the one that opened their doors to you. And so, of course, that makes it challenging, right?
Yeah, there's nobody here. There's no community. There's no Armenian community. There's no Armenian churches. There's no Armenian. There's nothing here, which is okay when you're a younger person. But when you're an older person, move here, it's devastating. It's isolating. It's completely you are alone, and the family is busy and your family works and nobody can see you as frequently, and you're stuck in your apartment. It's just very disheartening, and it really bothers me a lot. It breaks my heart thinking about that she lost that connection. She was alone, despite I would visit her, but I'm not a peer. I'm a lot younger. She didn't have the peers to talk to, and she got sick. She got sick because of, I think, loneliness. She, broken heart.
I understand that is that's a rough thing to face. She was probably not alone in what she experienced, and this is what the fallout of having to flee from your home as an Armenian. I mean, it was very difficult. Just starting up and starting over is hard.
Yeah.
But then without the outer, like a community that you could lean on. We travel, and the first thing I look for is like, where's the Armenian restaurant? Where's the church? Where's the yegeretzi? We look for that. And so I would think, being a refugee, no less, that's the very first thing. That's what my grandparents look for. That's what they built, community. I think the reassuring thing was that she never had a doubt that she had a loving family. Do you have any special objects that she gave you? A memento?
I'm trying to think. Well, fascinating story. My sister, who lives in Richmond, was robbed of all her jewelry and various house items, and so everything was melted. All her jewelry, all my family's heirloom jewelry was sort of taken out of the house. But strangely, a little ring was left. My grandmother's ring was either forgotten or perhaps left behind, and which is it's interesting, like she lost everything. My younger sister, all her stuff, but except that ring, that was my grandmother's ring that she wore all my life. And so we have that item from her.
If she were here, what would you say to her?
I probably would just sit with her. I wouldn't say anything. I would show her all my plants and the cats, and I would ask if she's happy that I've accumulated such an unholy amount of house plants that I literally cannot fit in upstairs and have to keep a lot of them down in my basement. So I think she'll be very proud.
Thank you so much, Violetta. This was amazing hearing about your grandmother, your Babo's life, and about all of the plants and cats. And she's truly special. Thank you so much, Violetta.
Of course. It was my pleasure, Anoush.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks again for listening. Special thanks to sound designer and musician Aris Beakley for creating the beautiful music for Season 2. You can find Aris at Noiseship on Instagram. To stay updated on new episodes, please give us a follow. And if you know an incredible Medz Mama, you can contact us through Instagram at the Medz Mamas or go to themedzmamas.com.